Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So I wanted to say, for me, reducing food waste really starts kind of before I get into the kitchen. So, and that really means tracking and planning. So I try to be very purposeful and intentional with what food I'm bringing into the kitchen in the first place. So I do something called inventory tracking where I kind of keep a note of what I already have in my kitchen, what things I don't have, and I also am pretty honest with myself. So if I know that I'm not going to eat a certain ingredient or I'm not going to finish it, I try to avoid buying it just to reduce that food waste in the first place. But I guess today what I really want to focus on are two strategies that I use a lot in the kitchen, and that is regrowing things from scraps and reusing things or repurposing items that we may think of as food waste but can really give us additional life before we really move on to getting rid of it. So again, if there's any questions in the chat room, please feel free to call them out. I'll be trying to monitor, but I probably won't get to all of them. So for me, I have a couple of items that I want to show that I tend to regrow. And the first one is ginger. So I feel like ginger for me is something that I buy a lot, but it's quite difficult to go through all of it, at least for me, just because you usually have to buy it in a really big amount or like a really big chunk. And sometimes I just don't use all of that. So actually ginger can pretty easily be regrown. What I do here is I have a chunk here. I don't know if you all can see. Let me know if you can't. And it's about 3 to 4 inches tall and a few inches wide. Something like this I could actually plant and regrow. The thing about ginger is it grows really well in our climate in San Diego because it is pretty sunny all year round. We have a good amount of, it's a very temperate climate. The only thing that it needs is humidity because it is a tropical plant, but it does grow pretty well in San Diego. The thing that I find with ginger is it usually takes a few months. So by the time that you plant it and the time that you're harvesting, it's going to be probably at least like 6 months. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you have space for it, it's really great if you use it, especially because young ginger is pretty hard to find. The next thing I want to talk about is green onions. I feel like a lot of people probably already know this. Green onions are extremely easy to regrow. All you do is put them in water and they kind of start to grow again. If you want to retain the flavor, you would put it in soil. I tend to find that after a few cycles of regrowth, the green onions tend to kind of get really small in size, and that's when I would move ahead and compost them and start a new batch from the grocery store. I also have some herbs here that I wanted to show. These are all really, really easy to water propagate, which means that you basically just, so I have here some rosemary. For me, herbs is something that's really difficult to go through when I buy it at the grocery store. I have to buy a whole bunch, and there's usually, I'm feeding myself like 1 to 2 people. And for me, I really don't go through that amount. So I actually found that growing my own herbs is pretty useful for me, just because I can take what I need and I don't have to go to the grocery store and buy a whole big bunch that I may or may not get through. So most herbs are actually super easy to regrow. All you do is take off the last few leaves like this, leave some space where you are actually going to put this in water. And the same goes for mint. I have some mint here. So I'm just going to take off these leaves and then put this in water. And in a few weeks, it'll start to grow some roots and we can put it in the soil. And the same thing with basil. So the basil is pretty much the same. I will say, if you're doing mint, be super careful about where you plant it. If you have a garden, I would recommend that you don't plant it directly in the soil because mint grows like a weed. Once you put it down, it starts to kind of proliferate very quickly and it's difficult to get rid of if you don't want it growing in certain spaces. So definitely want to keep in a container is a mint. One thing I want to say about rosemary too is if you are going to water propagate, make sure that the stem is green. A woody stem or a dark brown stem is not going to grow any roots. And then leafy greens. leafy greens like lettuce, bok choy, celery, those are all pretty easy to grow as water propagation. So basically what you do is you kind of just put the stem end, so the end that has the root, you put that in water and it'll usually start to regrow. The only thing to say about that is a lot of those plants, when you buy them from the grocery store, they've kind of already put all of their, I guess, strength or all of their resources into that plant that you're buying. So that head of lettuce, that's kind of already the end result of the plant. So you're probably not going to get a full lettuce plant from a root that you buy at the grocery store. You'll probably get like a few new leaves, a few baby leaves that you could throw into a salad if you want. But I wouldn't expect to get like a full crop of lettuce or other leafy greens that you buy from the grocery store. So here's an example. I have this Chinese spinach right here. And basically what I did was, these are the stem ends from the pieces that me and my family didn't eat. So I just put these in water. This has been in here for about a week or so. You can see that I apologize for the camera quality because I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but there are some roots that are growing. They're fairly small. I could try to plant this, but really it's not going to give me like a full new plant. If you really want to grow your own leafy greens, I would recommend that you start from seed. But you can see that there are some small little leaves that are starting to sprout, and these I would really eat as like a microgreen salad or, you know, just like as a snack. And I see there are some questions in the chat, so I'm just quickly going to see that. Okay, Kim asks, for the ginger, would you put that in the entire piece of the ground or just a section of it? Kim, I want to say it really depends on how much you want to grow. So the thing with ginger is this root will continue to grow once you put it into the ground. So all of the fresh baby ginger is going to be growing from this original root right here. I would say that if you want to break it up into chunks, try to have 3 by 3 inches or so. Make sure that they have eyes like these, like you can see kind of these little brown spots right here. These are the eyes, and this is where new shoots will grow from. You could put the whole thing, like a whole big chunk of ginger in the ground if you wanted to. Just be mindful that it will grow pretty significantly, so you'll want to make sure that either you put it in the ground or you put it in a pot that has enough space to accommodate that. Or what you could do is, once it starts to grow shoots up, you can kind of take it out of the soil and then break those shoots apart into individual plants, and then those will grow as their own plants. I usually just do chunks because I use ginger, and I usually don't have a whole thing left over. I usually just use my leftover bits. So great question. Catherine asks, you eat the ginger shoots or just the root part? So for me, I usually just eat the root part, but the ginger part does have a lot of good flavor. The actual plant itself, like the leaves and all of those can be eaten. I personally haven't done that before, but I know that they are edible. They do have a lot of good flavor. A lot of people add them to stir fries. And that's just another way to kind of use the whole of the plant. And then the next thing that I do is repurpose. So things that I would think are not, things that a lot of people would kind of not think that have another purpose other than being trash, I actually find that you can use a lot of it. So right now I'm in Seattle in Washington, and I've been eating a lot of seafood just because the seafood up here is so good. And so things like, I have here a bag of shrimp shells from when me and my family had shrimp the other night, and lobster shells and all of that. All of that you could save. So even the shells you could save, and you can make like a seafood stock, and then use that to enrich some sort of seafood stew or some sort of broth or soup or anything that you want to use it for. The same goes for chicken bones. Excuse me, sorry, chicken bones and carcasses and kind of like all the leftover pieces. I usually like to save those and make a homemade chicken stock with that. And then if you're vegetarian, I also do the same thing with beans. So I have here a can of chickpeas that I these are from dry, so I went ahead and soaked these and cooked them, and I store them in the broth that they, or the water that they get cooked in. And this makes a really, really good base for like a veggie broth, a soup broth. The same thing goes for black beans, for pinto beans, kidney beans. Depending also on how strong or like how much water you've used to cook chickpeas, you could also save that liquid, and which is called an aquafaba, and use that to whip it up and make desserts with it. So like I know that I've made a vegan kind of like mousse, a chocolate mousse with that. You could also use aquafaba from a can. So if you're buying canned chickpeas, that liquid is usually pretty concentrated and whips up pretty well. I also have here some stale bread. So my family goes through bread pretty quickly, but we don't always go through all of it. And so for stale bread, I find that it is really good to add to soup. So if I'm making something like a rivellata, which uses stale bread actually in the recipe, what you do is you make the soup. At the end, you put the stale bread on top, and then you bake it, and it kind of crisps up, and it adds this like additional texture that's really delicious. I also turn these into croutons, into breadcrumbs. So bread is definitely something that even after, I mean, as long as it's not moldy. If it's moldy, I would definitely not use that. Just because there's a lot of, if you can see the mold, then there's even more mold that is not visible. So I would get rid of it if it's moldy. But if it's stale, there's a lot of life still that this bread can give you. And then I wanted to talk about fruit scraps. So there's this one dish that I usually make in the summer. It's called tepache, and it's a Mexican it's kind of like a Mexican, very slightly alcoholic fermented pineapple drink. And the tepache, the way that you make it is, let's say you have a pineapple, you cut off all the skin, you're not going to use that skin, it's not edible. What I then do with that is I put it in water with some sugar, and I kind of let it sit at room temperature. It ferments for like a day or two, and then I drink that. And it's really delicious. It's really refreshing in the summer. If you're comfortable with fermenting, that's definitely something I would try. Fermenting and pickling are probably some of the oldest ways to preserve food and to make food extend beyond the life that it would have if it was fresh. So definitely pickling food that is on its way out, that's something that I do. Fermenting things that are on its way out, that's something that I do as well. And if you're comfortable with that, it's definitely a great option. And then I would say, aside from what I've just shown you today, freezing items, a lot of items freeze super well. And so freezing items, if you're not really comfortable with pickling or fermenting or drying or dehydrating, freezing is probably the easiest and most accessible way that we can extend the life of our food. If I have a bag of spinach that I know I'm not going to get through before it wilts, I'll chuck that in the freezer, and then I'll just add the frozen spinach right to whatever I want to eat when I'm going to eat it. And also, oh, sorry, I wanted to show you, I have here a bin. This is my compost bin. So I recognize that not everybody can compost, or it's not feasible in everybody's home situation, but if you can compost, that is a really great way to get rid of, or to basically repurpose scraps. Anytime that I'm cooking and I'm working with vegetables, I will basically have my bin ready just on the counter with me. And I fill that up with food scraps as I'm cutting my things that I know I can't put into a broth or regrow or reuse. I'll just chuck it into the compost bin, and then I empty this out maybe like whenever it gets full. So 2 to 3 days, I'll empty it out. I have a lid for it, so it contains a lot of the smell. And you don't have to buy like fancy tabletop compost bins to start collecting food scraps. You could just use a Tupperware. That's literally what I'm doing. I just have this Tupperware with a lid, and I just throw all of my food scraps in here. So we have about 10 minutes for questions or comments, or if anybody has something that they do at home that I haven't covered. All of these things that I've covered are things that I personally do at home, so there may be some vegetables or some methods that I don't personally do. So yeah, we have about 10 minutes and then I think we'll move on to our discussion about the story of plastic. If you haven't, if you saw it and you want to stick around for the discussion of that. Let's see, Sharon says space saving for the freezer, blending spinach completely and then putting it in the ice cube tray for smoothies. That's a really, really great suggestion. I know that you could also do this with a lot of fresh herbs. A lot of people will freeze them in olive oil or butter and throw those into the freezer as well. I would say smoothies is a really great way to get rid of, or not get rid of, but use up some produce that's kind of on its way out. And so smoothies in general and then putting stuff in the freezer, I think are great options. Let's see, Jennifer says, how long does the composting usually take? What is my turnover for my composting bin? So it really depends on the method of composting that you're doing. I do hot composting, which means that I really pay attention to the different levels of items in there. So there are green items, like green waste, like garden clippings. Food waste is considered green waste. Brown items, which are cardboard, dry plant items that are no longer fresh. And so by managing the ratios of that, I make sure that my compost stays at a pretty high temperature. And I generally find that that turnaround is really quick, like a few weeks, I'll have fresh compost that I can use. But there are less active or less involved methods where you kind of just throw things in a compost bin and kind of let nature take its course because things are composting naturally. Something like that would probably take a little bit more time because you're not actively managing the ratio levels to try and keep that temperature up. So I would find that probably depending on how active you are, probably like 6 months for a turnaround time, or maybe even a year if your home is really dry. Compost needs water and it needs air to break down more efficiently. So if you water your compost or turn it frequently, that will increase the amount of basically decomposition that's happening, and it'll shorten the timeline for when you'll have compost that's ready to use. Is it okay to add fats to compost? I would say unless you have a very hot compost pile and you're really knowledgeable about kind of what the temperatures are in there, I would not add fats, animal products, dairy. I would not add that to the compost. Just because you're introducing another variable for rodents or animals who might be attracted to the compost pile. You also, if you're not sure that there's like a maximum temperature that it's getting to, you might not be sure that everything is composting as well as it can. The same thing goes for weeds. So if you have weeds and you're kind of doing your gardening and pulling those weeds out, I would not put the weeds into the compost unless you know for sure that your compost pile is getting above a certain temperature, because then what'll happen is you'll take out all of your new compost, you'll put it on your plants, and then you'll have weeds start to come up. Octavio says worm composting is less maintenance and faster turnover. Yes, I will say that. I personally haven't done worm composting just because I feel weird having ownership of a bunch of little creatures that I have to like, you know, keep alive. So personally, I haven't done worm composting, but it's a really, really great option if you don't have a lot of garden waste or green waste. Worm composting is super easy if all you really have is kitchen scraps. You don't have to worry about putting browns into your compost. You could just take your kitchen scraps, throw it to the worms, and then they'll eat it. And you'll have worm casings, which are a super nutrient-rich way to amend your garden soil. I usually freeze whole bags of pre-washed spinach greens without any processing. Yeah, I do that as well sometimes. Spinach and fresh greens are something that I just really like. I know I'm always going to use, and I just like to have a backup in the freezer. So depending on what I'm going to be making, I most likely will use frozen greens rather than fresh greens, just because I don't have to worry about using up a whole bag of spinach before it goes bad. All right, any other questions or comments?
How do you do the inventory? Do you
The
do it by
inventory.
do you do it by using Siri or some automated thing so it can at least record it and then store it for you later?
So I do my inventory. I wish I had brought my journal down, but I have a journal where I kind of keep a lot of written notes about like things going on in my personal life that I want to keep track of. And part of that is an inventory track sheet. So basically what I have is I have little sticky notes where, and I reuse these sticky notes. So I have sticky notes where I kind of write an ingredient down that I frequently use. And then if I have the sticky note in my journal, I know that I have that ingredient. And once I'm out, I just take it off. That being said, I know a lot of people do spreadsheet tracking. So they'll create a spreadsheet of what they have, when it expires, and when they want to use it by. Some people just have a list that they just write on their fridge. So they'll just have like a little whiteboard, and on it they'll say, okay, these are the things that are in my fridge. And then when they look at that, they can say, oh, okay, I see I have a bag of spinach. That's probably going to go bad soon, so I should use that. So there's lots of different ways. It really depends on the technology that you're comfortable with, how you prefer to organize. In general, I'm a very tactile person, so I like using paper. That being said, if you use Siri often, that's definitely a great way to do it too. Just keep a running list of what you have on your phone. Oh, I like that tip. I know mushrooms can be regrown too, kind of in the same way that I've shown. I haven't personally tried it. So if you have tried regrowing mushrooms in your home from grocery store or from store-bought mushrooms, I would love to hear your experience, just because I eat a lot of mushrooms. So I don't think I have the confidence yet to do that myself. Okay, so thanks everybody for participating and engaging. You guys all had a lot of really thoughtful questions and comments. I do want to say, I said this earlier, but this is not like a catch-all for how to reduce waste in the kitchen. These are things that I personally do. So if there's anything that I missed, there's anything that you do and you want to share with the group, I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to me. You can email us at ssn@ucsd.edu, or you could email me at cindyperez@ucsd.edu. And yeah, if there's no other comments, I think we can move on to our discussion about the story of plastic. So feel free to hang on so we can get that conversation started. If you didn't watch it, but you still want to participate, it's also open to you. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to turn my camera off now so I can clean up my kitchen.
That was great. Thank you so much. I see you doing like cooking demos there. That's a great backdrop and setting for that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jen Bowser. I was a little late to this. You know, when you have to co-host a meeting, of course your computer and internet don't want to cooperate. So I was listening on my phone while trying to reconnect to the internet. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for participating in this month. As you had probably seen from our communications, it was Plastic Free July. And one of the ways that we wanted to engage with you was doing a movie screening of the story of plastic. So as Cindy said, if you didn't watch it, you feel free to stay for the discussion. But if you did, we want to hear your thoughts. And so I wanted to start by saying, if you want to either raise your hand physically or use the Zoom hand raising function. I wanted to start by saying, after watching the movie, did you have any immediate feeling of needing to change your behavior? And if so, how? Renee, if you want to get us started. Oh, we can't hear you. You are unmuted, but we can't hear you. Okay, I completely understand. We still can't hear you.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah. Hello, Renee.
Okay, third time's the charm.
It's okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm technically challenged. I immediately wanted to get rid of all Ziploc baggies in my house. I always try to get the children to use reusable containers when they were taking lunches to schools and things. And then as I was watching all this footage of just plastic bags, that made the biggest impression on me, even though it wasn't the main focus. Just the non-recyclable plastic was kind of shocking to see that.
Yeah, that's okay. What do you need?
Sorry? Oh, I think someone's unmuted. So anyway, that was my thing.
Well, I got 2 sets.
Someone's talking right now that
sets.
isn't muted. Can they? There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Renee. Go ahead.
So that's okay. That was made the biggest impression on me, was the need for internal changes at the house, even though this had a bigger focus in the movie, and it had and I do want to. I was so interested in this. I thought, gosh, I want to have my family watch this. I want this to be more widely available. It was really well done production. It was super educational.
Thank you. Ken, did you have something you wanted to share? You're also muted.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I got caught on an earlier Zoom with everything open, and I was doing things that I shouldn't have. But anyway, I'm trying to figure a way around that. Anyway, no, I saw it, and of course I knew most of that stuff, but putting it in one kind of video, one kind of presentation is very disturbing. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how do I not use plastics as I'm typing on my plastic keyboard and the plastic mouse, and I'm reusing a plastic cup, and I've got plastic, I reuse as much as I can and recycle as much as I can. But if you look around you, your phone, my phone covering's plastic, everything's plastic. And how I felt almost helpless or almost hopeless, because we use so much plastic in so many different ways. I'm looking at my computer screen, the borders are plastic, the Purell bottles are plastic. Everything's plastic. How do we avoid some of this stuff? I mean, you try to minimize, but how do we stop using it and start only using recycled stuff?
I'm looking around. I don't think I see any other hands. Oh, Kim. Yes, go ahead.
In response to what Ken was saying, I think, though, it's about, how I interpret it is what I could do is single-use plastic. So, the keyboard's made of plastic, everything's made of plastic, but then how can I just get rid of the little things in my daily life and just try to start there? Not that we don't want to go to glass bottles and things like that. So the importance of maybe reaching out to companies and saying, I want my ketchup to come in a glass bottle, or I want whatever you get in a glass bottle. I know I did that recently, and I got a response from a company, and they said, oh, well, it's about not breaking things when we ship it. But then I said, well, then how come company ABC over here can ship it in glass and not break it? So and they mentioned it about being the accountability of the companies, and I think that's important, or corporations or that. So.
Is it Catherine? My screen's cutting your name off. I'm sorry.
That's fine. How do you do? I'm Catherine. And I want to say I was just shocked by that movie, just utterly shocked. And seeing the way that these poor countries are buying, or they're being given our waste, our plastic. And you saw that one, it looked like it was a temple, and they just filled the entire area in front of it with the plastic waste so that they could spend their time going through it. And here's people that they're not on our first, they're third world countries, so they have, I guess you could say they have more time, they can work for less money. That's just the way it is now. I don't think we can change that, that's another discussion, but just to see the impact of our waste on these people. And, here they are, they're fishing, they're canoeing, and there's just waste all over the place. And, we don't know for sure it's from us. I mean, they were going through the trash and they said, oh, this is from Australia, this is from UK, but there was a lot of stuff from the United States. And, So I was just really shocked. And what's interesting is I needed to go to the grocery store to get something, and I was looking, I said, well, gee, I could get a 2-liter of soda and it's 99 cents, or I could get the little cans, and you know, the price per ounce was so much more. And then I just thought, oh, I don't need soda, forget it. And then finally, another thought is my former in-laws, they told me a story of when years ago they had a big metal bin, and they would put it by the back door, and they would have potato chips delivered in these reusable bins. And so they didn't have the little sachet packages, or what they call them in the movie. They had these big bins that were refilled, sort of like the milk bottles. When I was growing up, we had the milkman who would come and refill the milk bottles, and I guess they would clean them. And same with the sodas too. I remember Coke and Pepsi would come in reusable bottles. You bring them back to the grocery, you get your money back, and then they'd send those off and wash them, and lo and behold, you see them the next week with new soda in them. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Catherine. Renee.
To respond to what Catherine was saying, I think that kind of commitment takes a massive, or that kind of action takes a massive commitment from the entire community. I lived in Russia about 25 years ago when I was teaching English there, and everybody had these little metal mesh baskets, and you go down to the store and you buy eggs. You'd say, I want 3 eggs, or I want 8 eggs, or 12 eggs. You put it in your basket and walk away. And I remember asking my students where I could get an egg basket because I wanted to go buy eggs. And they said, well, how do you get eggs in the United States? And I said, well, we have this thing. It's called an egg carton. It's this special box, and each egg has its own little holder. And they said, oh, so you bring that back to the store? And I said, well, no, we throw it away. And they said, well, why would you go to the trouble of making this perfectly good special box to hold individual eggs in and use it one time and throw it out? But there, the milk trucks would pull up and people would go out. And again, this was 25 years ago outside of Moscow. And you'd turn the tap and get your milk. And if you were shopping, you'd always have bags in your pocket. Somebody would be on the side of the road or out in front of a building with bins of potatoes or onions or apples, and you would just take it in your own containers home. But because the entire society worked on that, it worked. So it would be great if we could do that, but it would take an anarchy over revolution in the U.S. for us to change our ways that way.
Kate?
Thanks. Yeah, that was kind of my big takeaway too. And like, I don't want to get too political, especially at a work thing. But it was really, you know, the capitalism and how we are being ruled by corporations and by the largely men who run those corporations. And at the end, you know, it really said you have to put the cost of this back on those corporations. So they have to feel the weight of it. So we can do, like, I felt the same way. Like, I have Brita filters. I was changing my Brita filter and I was like, oh my God, like, how can I recycle this Brita filter? And I looked online and there apparently is a way to recycle it. But to what Ken was saying, you know, you just look around and everything is plastic. And so it really goes back to those corporations and the people making money off of the oil, the fossil fuel that they're pulling out of the ground, and they're making all this plastic in order to profit from it, in order to keep the fossil fuel stuff going. And I'll end after this, is, you know, I've been really struggling with not only the capitalism part of it, but the imperialism part of it. And it also ties in, I mean, we're good friends with Saudi Arabia, and that's largely to do with the oil. And they have some questionable politics, as do we, because of our structure. And I just wanted to add that we're in 9+ imperialist wars right now, where we are stealing resources, mass murdering people, corrupting other people's governments, And really it's the goal of world domination, which is just pathologically immature and from my point of view. And so it's insanity, really. That's all, I guess I'll end on. We're kind of in this mire of insanity, and it's really political, and yeah, it's kind of scary and overwhelming. So that's all.
Well, thank you for sharing. Catherine, did you have something before I go to Cindy? Okay, Cindy, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I just finished cleaning up my kitchen, but I was listening to all the conversations. I wanted to follow up with what Kate said, and I think for me and for a lot of people, they think that recycling is the answer. And I think a lot of that is due to what was really hit on in the movie, which is corporations putting this responsibility on the consumer. And I was actually really shocked to learn that a lot of these campaigns that I grew up watching on TV, like Keep America Beautiful and all of these things, are actually being funded by the corporations that are creating all of the plastic in the first place. And I think it was really, really striking for me when they went to the Berkeley Recycling Center. So when I think of Berkeley, I think, oh, here's a city that's really ahead of the curve, that's really active when it comes to recycling, that really is trying to reduce the impact of the people and the waste that they're creating. And it was so shocking for me to hear from them, to hear from the ground and hear them say, actually, we don't have the resources to take in all this recycling. We've been pushed by the city and by these corporations to accept recycling that is costly to process, that isn't worth anything really, and that these companies just keep making and producing and pushing on consumers. So that was my real big takeaway. And so I've always tried to be committed to low waste and zero waste, and I think now more than ever that's really been emphasized in my personal life.
Sharon, go ahead.
Yes, I of course was horrified by the film. And also I had just recently watched a film called Dark Waters. And it was about the Teflon industry, making Teflon. And that I don't recall much in the plastics movie about the people that work at those plants, the dangers that it's doing to those persons, as well as the community outside of that they talked about with the breathing, but there's also the workers that are involved. It's a whole big, awful mess. And I just wanted to say, I'm just really sad. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kim just put that in the chat about the children that were in the 2.5 mile radius of the factory. Just looking, oh, Catherine.
I just wanted to follow up to Renee and say, I agree, we do need to have a societal change, a cultural change from bottom up. I think that's where it has to start. And I think if you look at California, we've done a lot of progressive things. We banned plastic straws. We banned the single-use plastic bags. Okay, this is all pre-pandemic, and suddenly with the pandemic, now everything's hoofs to the wind. We don't know, what we're doing, but hopefully we can get back to the point where we can be at this place where we're back to showing the country, look, this is how you can do things. This is how we can change things for the better. And I don't know of a single person who gets out of their car and doesn't carry a bag with them to the grocery store, at least pre-pandemic. I mean, I would see everyone doing it, and it was so encouraging. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, that's a good question. How do we think that the pandemic is going to impact? It seems like it will be a worse situation than a better one, right? Yeah, lots of shaking heads.
Sharon, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to add something?
I think it was from before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the big question was what can I do next, right? I think for the majority of the movie, I felt pretty hopeless. a lot of it was, okay, I as an individual consumer, I can recycle, I can go zero waste, but really in the face of, all these corporations, what really can we do? And I think the takeaway at the end of the message was really legislature, right? Lobbying, voting, going out there and advocating. Like one of the big things is ending or reducing the all of the incentives and all of the credits that the US government gives to oil refineries, going out and advocating for banning of these single-use plastics, of these packaging materials that really put the burden on us as a taxpayer to process and get rid of. And then I think, so for me, that was kind of the hopeful message at the end, was really going out there and advocating, voting, and just saying no to plastic, breaking free from plastic. So I don't know if you guys all saw the website that was kind of shared at the end, Break Free from Plastic. They have a lot of really great strategies for what we can do as individuals to try and hold some of these corporations accountable, to try and mitigate some of these issues that were brought up.
Thank you, Cindy. Kim?
I would it got me thinking about but how do we encourage, okay, and then I started thinking about my work situation, and imagine once I'm back in the library, okay, after COVID has, whatever, the next time I'm back in the library with all of my coworkers. And then I was thinking, how do you even get people to not have a potluck and bring in all these disposable things, you know what I mean? I think many of us here have been, trying to get that message out all sorts of different ways. But I mean, when I'm in the library, when I'm back in my work situation, I mean, when I'm around other people, I see it all the time. I don't see people, really sitting down to watch movies like this that are really kind of heart-wrenching, because to me, I looked at it like, I wouldn't want this stuff in my backyard, but it's okay for me to send it away to somebody else. But eventually there's going to be too much sending away, and it's going to wind up on our shores, whether it's, wherever it is, whether they're dumping it in La Jolla, it's going to wind up here. And that was, I think, what really made me angry is I remember somebody, not in the movie, but somebody one time said about, when you throw it away, it's not away, it's just going to somebody else it becomes somebody else's problem. And I feel, again, that's a privilege thing, because I have privilege to buy all of this stuff, and I've never really had to, if I want plastic forks, I can go and buy them. That's a privilege thing. And the countries, a lot of the countries that are ending up with it don't have that privilege. And so now they have to make something of our trash. And I think that is what really hit me, is I know that, but just to so look at our privilege. We're just we don't care. Well, eventually we're going to have to care. And how do I try to help people? I mean, how do I change, and what can I do, and how can I inspire other people that this should be important? This should be important to every single person on this campus. I think every single person should have to take a look at this video, or stream this and just see, and then see how they feel about it. Because just us talking, I mean, we all are feeling that kind of sense of urgency. So that was my takeaway.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, with this pandemic, we've learned that we can't trade off health, and single use is necessary to maintain health. And we've kind of known that, but now with this pandemic, we have that at an extreme. And how do we reconcile that this is a possibility again in the future? How do we avoid this stuff? So we also need to find a way of making single-use items that are not plastic.
I wanted to jump in and follow what Ken just said. One of the things that they talked about in the film was how a lot of these plastics industries are pushing the medical aspect of it, pushing the life-saving aspect of it, and in reality, the majority of what they're producing are these single waste or these single-use product packaging, kind of like mostly for consumers for convenience. And I think it's important to note, like, I really don't think personally that waste is something that we could ever stop producing. Like, we're always going to have waste. And I feel like for me, at least for now, while we're still innovating, while we're still thinking about what we can do in terms of non-plastic single use, I think there are some industries like the medical industry that I personally would say, okay, I prioritize this company or this industry needs to have this, because what are the other options, right? And so I think offsetting kind of like the priorities of, well, yes, we should focus on reducing single-use packaging waste, so that way the medical industry and the other industries that really, really need to use plastic right now can do that without creating these huge waste problems.
Ken?
Yeah, if you noticed in a lot of the plastic stuff, you saw a lot of those the flimsy plastic, for the snack bags and stuff. And it's, what do we do about the fact that we do snack, and snacks are not really that good for us for the most part, most of the snacks that we eat. And the single-use package is somewhat a way of helping people monitor the amount of that stuff in, and it is medical in some ways. But then again, in order to avoid that, you'd have to have more self-discipline, and you can see how well that's going with all our masking and all that stuff right now in the general public. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to approach that to help maintain better health by limiting our bad snacks?
Well,
Thank you,
Ken,
Rachel,
as a
for
former
your...
Weight Watchers person. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you, Rachel, for sharing about TerraCycle. I didn't know that they were recycling masks. That's very interesting. Go ahead, Renee.
I did Weight Watchers several years ago, and one of the things that they said was buy yourself some reusable snack containers. On Sunday, fill them up with almonds or chips or whatever it is you're going to eat. And buying those things in bulk if you can at a store like Sprouts or something else, then you can do portion control. You can still snack, but then you're not buying, it would also be addressed by the not buying one-use bags. And it does take a commitment for sure, because you have to do that. So that's just a small solution.
Catherine?
Okay, so I recently went to Sprouts and I wanted to get one of my favorite from the bulk bins, and they have all those prepackaged now, all in single-use plastic, and we're not allowed to use the bulk bins into our own packages. It's just, this pandemic thing is just wreaking havoc on the planet. It's amazing.
I ran into the same thing when I went to Unleashed, which is the smaller version of the Petco that's in my neighborhood. I used to just bring my bag back with me to fill from the treat bar to fill with treats. And yeah, now they have they're gigantic bags of these treats. So, I mean, good, because I don't have to go back for a while, but I can't reuse my bag. So that's too bad. So I guess my question for this group as staff, that what we have in common is the university that we work at. And we're, I think for the most part, all from different departments. And from what Kim was saying of how do we share this? How do we spread the word? My call to action is, how do I help you in sharing the word? And so I would ask, and you don't have to raise your hand now, you can email me, if you would want to participate in developing some sort of resource that we could enable staff to encourage their coworkers. And I don't know that we'd be able to share the movie. Maybe we can find another resource. We could share the website, but I don't know if we could share the movie because, as you probably gathered from the email that we sent, it did end at, our streaming version of it ended at 12, so it's no longer available. And to get that link required a lengthy registration, and I don't know that we could open it up to everyone. I guess, Kim, you and I could talk about if it's something the library could offer, because there are university options. It's just we did it kind of under the radar as a grassroots organization as opposed to an affiliation of a institution. Renee, I don't know why it's not more widely available. It was free. We didn't pay anything for it. So why we needed to host this event, I'm not really sure. Again, we were doing it under the grassroots umbrella. Yeah, Catherine?
There's services like Cast where you can do like a watch party and invite people, and then, so it's a one-time.
They wouldn't let us.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think if we weren't in COVID time, that is an option, but instructions were to not stream it over Zoom or any other platform similar. But how could we share this message, and how could we get others to feel that impact that we've felt and to start to make this change? And how can we provide resources to them so that they can get out and this can be a community effort? So if you are interested, if you want to email me, I think we can develop something that's meaningful. I mean, the reality is we're probably not going to see each other in person for a while. So Kim, I don't know when you're going to see your colleagues in person. Yes, Claire, hi.
Hi there. I'm very new to this group. I've actually never,
Welcome.
I think, participated. And, you know, you're in asking how do you get the word out? That was kind of what was very interesting to me when I joined today and saw the number of participants at 20, which is great, but which is not nearly enough participation to really move the dial on this subject matter. And I think that the one thing I can say from having watched the film is kind of like a lot of issues we're all dealing with right now is you don't know what you don't know. And so it might not be as, you know, as sexy a topic as it needs to be, you know, because people might not really think it's as big a deal as it really is. I joined the person who saw Dark Water. I saw that earlier this year, and I just came out of the theater shaking like this, like, you know, the last little stats that said this stuff is in 98% of our systems and we'll never poop it out or piss it out or whatever. I was like, oh, you know, nobody told me. And so even looking at this thing today, I just, you know, I was just really impacted by how much stuff we do that we really are just not even paying attention to. And I'm sure this group does more stuff with a sensibility toward it. And like somebody else said, I think, you know, I felt like, okay, I'm not a horrible citizen environmentally, but really I am, you know, because I love a good bottle of shampoo and this and that and the other. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to have to do now? I saw the chat about making our own chips, and I started thinking, am I going to have to make my own toothpaste and deodorant? And, you know, what is the thing? So I did write down all of the break free from plastic, and we'll look on there to see those things. But I just want to thank you all as a group for offering it. And I don't know why more people don't tune in, except that they just see it as something for other people to deal with. So that's my little 2 cents. And thanks for doing this. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. No, you're right. As someone who does this full time, it is challenging. I don't ask anyone. I'm not perfect. I don't ask anyone to change all of their behaviors because I think that's unreasonable and really probably not possible. We have to use some things in our lives, and I think you do have to compromise. But being aware and making those educated decisions and purposes or purchases and choices really can make a difference. We did, although there are only 20 people on the call, there were almost 60, I think, who watched the movie. I would have liked that to be more too. We did a lot of advertising for it, so. But it was also a 90-minute movie, and maybe that turned some people off because they're done looking at screens. I know I'm starting to feel fatigued and probably need to take a vacation soon. I will note that it's 12:59, so I don't want to keep anyone longer. If anyone has anything else to share, thank you all for your chat messages, for your discussion, participation, for coming here today, being present. We appreciate all of you. Nothing else? All right, well, it's great seeing all of you. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.